As people get used to the new normal, can our behaviours and experiences over the past year help shape and improve how we live?
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Irish research continues to make advancements in human health and the health of the planet.
That's so amazing.
This week on 10 Things to Know About, we're looking at how our bodies digest the food we eat and whether we can manipulate our gut into thinking we are more or less hungry. Like all living organisms on the planet, we need food for our very survival. But our diets have changed significantly over the last few decades. Our lifestyle choices have a huge impact on what we eat, with more people moving from meat-based diets to vegetarian and vegan diets. But as our diets change, how does this impact on our bodies and the way we digest foods?
The digestive system is a complex part of human anatomy. In order to get the right nutrients for our body, we need to understand how food gets broken down and what factors affect the digestibility of food.
I'm catching up with André Broadcorb, who's investigating the structure of food and how our bodies break it down during digestion.
A number of years ago, I worked a lot on dairy proteins, but there has been a slow shift from animal-based proteins to the digestion of plant-based proteins. So over the last number of years, I have started to work with alternative proteins, plant proteins, cereal proteins.
Do we digest the animal-based proteins in the same way as we do the plant-based proteins?
No, there's actually a difference. Dairy proteins or dairy milk products, they are actually designed to feed an infant. So they're designed as food. So the digestibility of proteins is very high. So digestibility basically means how much I consume and how much actually ends up in the blood and thus the downstream effect of the proteins. For plant proteins, that's different. So plant proteins are not designed to feed us, but we adapt, we cook plant proteins. Our digestive system adapts as well. So plant proteins are less digestible. For instance, for dairy would be 90 to 95% is digested. For plant proteins, it's generally around 80, but goes down to 50%. So for you and me, it's probably not so important. But if you look at the world population, or if you look at more vulnerable population, there's more important.
And this is something that you're looking at in depth now in your research?
Absolutely. What we don't know is what happens from the time I eat the food to the time it arrives in the blood. So the gastrointestinal tract.
When I met André in 2015, surprisingly little was known about how we digest food. However, there have been huge developments made over the last 5 years.
You did something for us in the last time we spoke years ago. You actually ingested a camera.
Yes, absolutely. And there were very nice images, but you can't take any samples. If you want to take samples, you have to use a nasal gastric tube, so basically a tube through the nose into the stomach. Pretty invasive. I've done it as well, but it's very invasive. If you want to understand food digestion, you have to go to humans. There's no way around it. However, human intervention studies, they are expensive. Sometimes you can't do them for ethical reasons, and they are much more difficult. So that's why there was a drive towards in vitro lab-based models, so we can simulate digestion step by step in the laboratory.
André has led a group of international scientists which created a way to replicate the human digestive system in the lab. This allows researchers to study what happens to food as it passes through each phase of the gastrointestinal tract.
So here we have a sample of food, in this case it's wheat cereal, to which we add simulated oral fluid to simulate the oral phase. We then transfer this into this compartment to simulate the gastric phase, and at the same time we add the gastric enzymes, and we also add acid to simulate the acidic conditions in the stomach. After this phase, we transfer the gastric digester into another compartment, and we simulate the intestinal phase in an incubator at 37 degrees.
The aim of the in vitro model is to mimic human digestion so well that it would reduce or replace animal or human trials. To test the accuracy of the digestive model, Andre put food through it and compared it with in vivo samples taken from human trials.
So here you see an image here on the left-hand side as the in vitro, the lab digestion. You can clearly see these intact plant cells with plenty of proteins in it. And on the right-hand side, that's the same breakfast cereal that's in vivo, so from a human small intestine. And again, you see intact cells with plenty of protein in there. That means they are undigested and they will end up in the large intestine. These kind of images really excite us. So I think they're spectacular because they show the in vitro, in vivo comparison. We have data, so we have hard numbers on that as well, but I think the visual aspect is very nice.
After putting a food through the in vitro gut model, Andre is left with digesta. Linda Giblin then examines how our bodies absorb nutrients from this digesta through the gut barrier.
The gut barrier is a single layer of cells. It's the gatekeeper of where food passes from the gut into the bloodstream. And it's very important that we keep that gut barrier healthy. So in some diseases like inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome, or in celiac disease, or indeed in food allergies, this gut barrier can be damaged. We eat food for growth and maintenance. So if we go back and look at the proteins that Andre talked about digesting, then those proteins are strings of amino acids, and the gut will digest them into smaller strings called peptides.
Linda and her team are examining what these peptides are and whether they can provide health benefits even beyond growth and maintenance.
So we want to know, do they affect the gut barrier? And of course, every protein will have the ability to generate lots of different types of peptides and unique peptides. So as we move from a meat and milk diet more towards a plant-based diet, then we want to know what peptides are produced by these alternative proteins and whether they have a health benefit.
Scientists can grow a gut barrier in a lab over 21 days. An electric current is then run through it to measure its resistance and ensure it has matured properly. The digesta from Andre's lab can be put onto the gut barrier, and whatever passes through it is what would be absorbed into the bloodstream.
Ultimately, what we want to do is not only understand how food is digested and how food proteins are digested, but also we want to create foods that are better for you at your different life stages. So maybe energy bars or nutritional beverages that suit where you are in life, whether you're an infant or a teenager or an adult or an older adult.
What do you hope is the impact of your research?
We are producing novel scientific information for food producers, but also for the public. So if we have a new product, a new food product, we want to fully characterize it and maybe find some health benefits, and that will ultimately benefit the consumer.
From focaccia to pita to naan, bread is a food that can be found in every culture and climate. It's an everyday food. But what if it could be used to manage illness as well?
Having suffered with irritable bowel syndrome for most of her life, Karen O'Donoghue created a new recipe for bread, which she says cured her condition.
How did IBS actually affect you?
So, well, I was on the toilet for a long time. I was always bloated. Going to the bathroom was always an uncomfortable experience. It was painful. It took a long time, so there was a huge amount of embarrassment around it because nothing would happen in there. I guess you come out, I want to say deflated, but no.
It was a pain in the bum?
It was a pain in the bum. And I think because my brother and sister and my parents, we were all on the same diet. We were all eating the same food, and they didn't suffer with this issue. It kind of just felt like bad luck. I fundamentally believed that my problem was rooted in the food that I ate and how I was processing that food. And so I went to research papers and started studying what is coming out on microbiome. And basically what was becoming really obvious to me was that our gut bacteria eat off a certain formula of fibre to protein, vitamins to minerals. And so I kind of started just creating mathematical equations based on how our gut bacteria like to eat, and then started placing recipes on top of these equations.
And what made you think I'm going to create a bread?
I knew that grains, nuts and seeds, cup for cup, are higher in fibre than vegetables, obviously proteins, cheeses, all that kind of stuff. I've been baking since I was 4 years old. My mom was a baker. I'm obsessed with bread. And I think bread culture exists in every country around the world. And so it seemed like the best vehicle to cause change for people with gut-related issues.
And what was in that loaf?
One of the central ingredients to that bread was the ingredient known as teff. Teff is the seed of love grass. It's the only grain that has vitamin C. It's incredibly potent in iron, magnesium, zinc, phosphorus, calcium, all the minerals and vitamins that were kind of essential to my mathematical equation. But not only that, cup for cup, it was the highest in prebiotic fibre versus any other grain in the world. I went from having one bowel movement every week to 2 weeks to 2 a day. And so it really was like a miracle based on 18 months of science, research and development.
Karen has set up Teagasc Scola in Westport, where she teaches people how to bake her bread. I've been invited to take part in the course.
Once everything has been fully blended, you want to take your ball up with your plastic show scraper and just ensure that it's in one kind of big blob like that.
Well, as a pharmacist, I've always had an interest in preventative medicine and the whole holistic approach to healthcare. I discovered this course and here I am today.
So here we go, our teff sourdough.
Yay, look at them, beauties. Delicious, so good.
The bread has its own flavour, it has its own quality. Like I've had a slice and a few cheeses and some salad and I'm satisfied. I'd like more.
Gut health, everybody. What is beautiful about this story is that you've kind of taken all the best bits of nature, applied the science to it, and come up with this product that is actually like nourishing the healthy bacteria in your microbiome and giving people a better health and well-being.
Absolutely. Right now, I have thousands of people across the UK who have used this loaf, this particular loaf, to eradicate their IBS symptoms. So anecdotally, we have so many case studies. I wanted to get that anecdotal evidence before I went to a university, and now I am on the edge of starting that kind of 2-year research project. For me, the key is prevention over cure. Don't let yourself get to that point. You eat in a certain way, you process your food in a certain way, and you will have a really, really happy, fulfilling life.
With modern science providing us with unparalleled insight into our gut health, it's worth remembering that our current advanced knowledge stands on the shoulders of some rather rudimentary science. Take, for instance, the curious case of Alexis St. Martin, who in 1822 was accidentally shot at a fur trading outpost in rural Michigan. Fired at close range, the bullet tore a hole right through the wall of his stomach. But, thanks to the deft surgical skills of a local doctor, he miraculously survived with a fistula, a hole in his side, providing a permanent open window into his stomach. His doctor, sensing an opportunity to make his own contribution to science, tricked his illiterate patient into signing an agreement to become a house servant by day and a guinea pig by night. For a decade, the doctor recorded every piece of food entering his patient's stomach before taking up a front row seat to shed light on the poorly understood world of digestion. Upon discovering that hydrochloric acid in the stomach, combined with a little movement, played a key role in breaking down food, the doctor even went so far as to lick the inside of his patient's stomach, revealing that it didn't have an acid taste until it was actively working to break down food. Most incredibly, throughout this time, the patient remained in perfect health, suggesting that even if he didn't like being poked, prodded, and tasted, he certainly had the stomach for it. See you next time.
After eating a big meal, many of us will say that our stomachs are full. But new research suggests that it's actually the small intestine and not the stomach that gives us that feeling. A world leader in how metabolism works, Carl LaRue is researching whether you can manipulate the gut hormones that affect hunger.
Is it possible for us to control our feelings of hunger?
I think anybody that asks that question know intuitively that none of us can think ourselves less hungry or think ourselves more satisfied. The part of the brain that controls hunger and fullness sits in areas that you and I can't control by thinking. Therefore, when we are targeting people who either have weight that's too high or too low, talking to them is not going to make them less hungry or more satisfied, but changing how the gut signals to that part of the brain can make a fundamental difference.
Talk to me about the communication pathway between the gut and the brain.
The gut is the part of the body that makes the most hormones. And we are understanding that these hormones are very important when it comes to signaling hunger and also signaling fullness.
And so targeting those hormones is the key to being able to help people understand when to eat or when to stop eating?
So the hormones is a really good place for us to start because we can measure it in blood. And we now think about some of these hormones as hunger hormones. And if we give that to people, they increase their hunger. And if we take it away, they decrease hunger. Other hormones we call satiety hormones, meaning if I can increase it, I make people feel more satisfied. Or if I decrease it, I reduce satiety.
We're increasingly aware of the relationship between diet and body weight, but the human body is hugely complex. Some people who struggle with weight management can receive bariatric surgery to adapt their digestive system to help them lose weight. Anatomically, this surgery is very similar to treatment for esophageal cancer, and Carl noticed a similar weight loss in his patients with those who had undergone surgery for esophageal cancer.
Both of those operations increases the signal from the gut to the brain. So the gut is just talking to the brain in a much louder voice. And typically what will happen is food will go very rapidly from when you've ingested it directly into the small intestine. So if you imagine if you are a small intestine, the last thing you want to do is receive a large amount of undigested food very quickly. And of course, what you will then do if you are in that position is you'll send a signal to the brain to say, please stop what you're doing, stop eating now. But if you're a person that have obesity, you experience that gut talking to the brain as a positive because you're feeling satisfied. However, if you're a person that had esophageal cancer, who've already lost weight, now you experience that same voice from the gut as a negative because you're feeling too satisfied too quickly.
Ireland has one of the highest rates of esophageal cancer in the world, with over 400 new cases per year. 10 years ago, Bríd Conway received her diagnosis.
Most of my esophagus was removed, and I believe the esophagus is about 30 centimetres in length, so your average school ruler. And he explained to me that what would happen is that he would cut my esophagus out, so there would be an incision there, and then he would take my stomach, stretch it up, reattach it to the remaining 5 centimetres of esophagus that was left. So effectively, my stomach is now at the back of my throat.
God.
Yeah.
That must have been very difficult to hear that this was your new future.
Yeah, because you're getting your head around a cancer diagnosis, a major surgery, telling your family. So it wasn't the best Christmas I've ever had, let me tell you, because I got the news before Christmas and surgery in the January. So yeah, no, it was very, very difficult.
What effect did this surgery have on your eating habits?
They changed 100%. I no longer describe myself as being hungry. I've never, ever described myself being hungry. I know I need it.
And do you mourn that? That's a loss, right? Certainly for me, my relationship with food.
It did change. At this stage, I can say I might be looking forward to something, but at the same time, I've never used the word hungry. I'm never hungry. They advised me to eat something regularly so that you at least would remind your brain of the habit of eating. The other big change is portion sizes. Even simple things like I will choose a smaller plate, and then your brain is working. At least I can fill a smaller plate. I will try to make sure that I have vegetables, because so if I can fit in more vegetables, less of something else. So you're literally measuring it, and you're also trying to ensure that what you're putting in is nutritionally sound as well. So I suppose that's probably one of the big changes, is that eating becomes a kind of a scientific affair and a little logistical pursuit all the time. It would be lovely to be able to say, God, I'm hungry, or you walk in somewhere and say, not just that I'll try that, but actually I'm starving.
We do a large amount of research within the laboratory. We do research in animal models to understand the fundamental biology, but ultimately we need to do the research also in humans that have the diseases that we want to treat. We are then able to manipulate the hormones, either give them more or block the hormones. We can also track the patients over time, so we can see what happens before they have an operation, what the hormone levels will do, what the signal is directly in the brain by using MRI scans to see which part of the brain is activated when we show pictures of food, and we can repeat that after they've had an operation.
By learning how to manipulate hunger and satiety hormones, Carl hopes that this could be used as one tool in a range of treatments to help patients with obesity and esophageal cancer.
And if you can't eat because you feel satisfied all the time, or you are underweight and you're concerned about that, your quality of life just isn't good enough. But if we can explain that, and there's also intervene and allow you to gain weight naturally, that improves quality of life. And also, we hope, will help people live longer in a much healthier way.
Well, that's our 10 things to know about gut health. And that's the end of another series. As we face up to global challenges, it's reassuring to know that Irish research continues to find ways to make our world a happier, healthier place.